The most expensive mistakes are usually printed on official letterhead. The sharp scent of rain still lingered in the cool morning air as I rolled my pickup truck onto the driveway, its freshly washed concrete reflecting the first streaks of sunrise like polished stone. Tiny puddles rested along the expansion joints exactly where they were supposed to after every storm, quietly guiding water toward the drainage channel designed years earlier. I had inspected that surface hundreds of times, not because I doubted the work, but because I had designed infrastructure for most of my professional life. Concrete always tells the truth if you know where to look. I stepped out with a travel mug of black coffee, just as the familiar electric hum of a golf cart echoed through the neighborhood. The sound grew louder until it stopped directly in front of my house. Karen Dawson climbed out wearing a navy blazer despite the humid Texas morning, followed by a homeowners association compliance officer carrying a clipboard thick with paperwork. Neither of them admired the clean driveway glistening beneath the morning light. Neither of them noticed the carefully engineered drainage slope that had protected my property through countless storms. Karen walked straight toward me with the confident smile of someone delivering a decision she believed could never be challenged. Without offering a greeting, she pulled a bright yellow notice from her folder and placed it into my hand. The bold lettering immediately caught my attention. Homeowners Association violation. Fine amount, $3,000. Reason, unauthorized driveway modification. Corrective action required within 10 days. I read every line slowly while raindrops continued falling from the oak tree beside the garage onto the smooth concrete below. Karen folded her arms and waited for the reaction she clearly expected. Your driveway does not comply with current community standards, she said. If it is not removed and reconstructed within 10 days, additional penalties will be assessed. I looked from the notice to the driveway and back again. 12 years earlier, every inch of that concrete had been poured according to professionally stamped engineering drawings, county permits, municipal drainage requirements, and architectural approval issued before construction even began. Nothing about it had changed since the day inspectors signed the final completion documents. Current standards? I asked quietly. Karen nodded without hesitation. Those are the rules. The compliance officer avoided eye contact while making another note on his clipboard. Across the street, a curtain moved slightly as one of my neighbors watched from a front window. Karen seemed satisfied that the message had been delivered. She turned toward the golf cart before pausing long enough to add one final sentence. You should start getting estimates. Replacing concrete is expensive. Then she drove away, leaving only the fading sound of the electric motor and the faint smell of wet asphalt drifting through the subdivision after the storm. I remained standing at the edge of my driveway, staring at the yellow notice resting against my palm. Most people would have seen nothing more than a piece of concrete leading to a garage. I saw drainage grades, inspection reports, expansion spacing, load calculations, permits, approvals, and a construction history carefully documented long before Karen ever became Homeowners Association president. She believed the driveway violated the rules. What she did not know was that every line beneath that concrete had already been measured, approved, photographed, and permanently recorded years before she decided to rewrite the story. The following morning began with the steady rhythm of rainwater dripping from the edge of the garage roof, while sunlight slowly pushed through the clouds left behind by yesterday's storm. The driveway looked exactly as it had for more than a decade, its smooth concrete surface drying evenly as tiny streams of water followed the shallow drainage channels toward the curb. I crouched near one of the expansion joints with a cup of coffee in my hand, studying the surface out of habit rather than necessity. Engineers develop strange routines after enough years in the field. We notice slopes, elevations, water flow, and small details that most people never see. Nothing about the driveway suggested poor construction. Nothing indicated settlement, cracking, or drainage failure. It was performing exactly as it had been designed. Around mid-morning, my email notification chimed. Another message from the Homeowners Association had arrived. Karen informed me that a compliance inspection had documented additional concerns and warned that failure to begin corrective action before the deadline could result in escalating penalties and possible legal enforcement. Attached to the email were several photographs taken during the previous day's inspection. As I enlarged each image, something immediately caught my attention. Every photograph had been framed so tightly that only isolated sections of concrete were visible. The drainage swale beside the driveway had been excluded. The curb inlet receiving runoff had been cropped out. Even the landscaped border separating the driveway from the lawn was missing from every frame. The pictures presented a completely different impression than someone would have received by standing on the property. Instead of responding, I downloaded every attachment exactly as it arrived, preserving the original file information before creating multiple backups. Documentation had solved too many engineering disputes throughout my career for me to ignore details like metadata. That afternoon, I drove to the county building department carrying nothing more than a notebook and the original permit number stored inside my records. The lobby smelled of fresh paper and floor polish while residents waited quietly for building permits, zoning questions, and inspection appointments. After explaining that I wanted copies of historical records for my property, the clerk smiled politely and returned a few minutes later with access instructions for archive construction files. As I reviewed the digital index, I immediately found entries matching the year my driveway had been replaced. Building permit, drainage review, final inspection, completion certificate. Every record appeared exactly where I expected it to be. Before leaving, I requested certified copies of each document. Walking back toward my truck, I realized something else no longer fit the story Karen was telling. If county approvals, inspection reports, and construction records still existed without interruption, then why had the Homeowners Association suddenly begun acting as though the driveway had never been properly authorized? Later that evening, I compared the current Homeowners Association guidelines with an archived copy I had saved years earlier while preparing another neighborhood project. Side by side, the differences became impossible to ignore. Language describing driveway dimensions, materials, and design standards had been rewritten. More importantly, the revision date appeared only weeks before Karen issued the violation notice. I leaned back in my chair and listened to the quiet hum of the ceiling fan while the timeline slowly assembled itself in my mind. The concrete outside had remained unchanged for 12 years. The only thing that had recently changed was the paperwork. And when paperwork changes after construction has already been approved, the real question is never what was built. The real question is who decided to rewrite the rules after the work was already finished. Late Friday afternoon, warm sunlight reflected across the driveway as the last traces of moisture disappeared from the concrete, leaving the surface exactly as smooth and even as it had been since the day construction was completed. I parked my truck at the edge of the garage and carried the certified county records inside, placing them beside the original engineering drawings already spread across my dining room table. The faint smell of fresh coffee mixed with the scent of blueprint paper as I carefully compared every document in chronological order. Building permit, survey, drainage calculations, structural specifications, county inspection reports, final completion certificate, architectural review approval from the Homeowners Association. Every signature matched, every date aligned, every page confirmed the same simple fact. The driveway had never been unauthorized. It had been reviewed more thoroughly than most projects in the entire neighborhood. Just as I finished organizing the paperwork, another email from Karen appeared in my inbox. She informed me that the association had completed an additional compliance review and now considered my failure to begin demolition as evidence of willful noncompliance. The message warned that further legal action could follow if the driveway remained unchanged after the deadline expired. I read every sentence slowly before saving the email without replying. The language sounded confident, but confidence is not evidence. Every new notice she sent simply added another dated record to the growing timeline. Around sunset, I drove past the neighborhood clubhouse on my way home from the hardware store. Through the front windows, I noticed Karen meeting with two board members around a conference table covered with folders. A large copy of the current architectural guidelines rested in front of them, while several printed photographs lay scattered beside it. They looked busy preparing for something, but what caught my attention was what I did not see. None of the older approval binders were anywhere in the room. That observation stayed with me all evening. After dinner, I opened my laptop and searched through archived copies of the association website that I had saved years earlier while helping another homeowner understand landscaping requirements. The older version contained an entire section explaining driveway approval procedures, including references to grandfathered improvements that had already received written authorization before future guideline revisions. That language no longer appeared in the current version. Curious whether the change had ever been publicly discussed, I reviewed every available meeting summary posted online over the previous year. I found references to routine maintenance, annual budgeting, holiday decorations, and landscaping updates, but nothing mentioning a vote removing previously approved driveway protections. Engineers are trained to investigate missing information as carefully as the information that actually appears. Sometimes the absence of one document explains an entire project. I printed the archived webpage alongside the current version and highlighted every revision in bright yellow. The differences were impossible to dismiss as simple formatting changes. Entire paragraphs had vanished. Terminology had shifted. Requirements had expanded. Yet nowhere could I find evidence explaining when homeowners had officially been notified or how existing projects were supposed to be affected. Outside, the last rays of sunlight stretched across the concrete before fading into the quiet evening. I stepped onto the driveway and watched rainwater from a neighbor's sprinkler flow exactly where the original drainage calculations predicted it would 12 years earlier. Nothing about the engineering had failed. Nothing about the construction had changed. The only thing shifting beneath my feet was the paper trail, and someone had underestimated how difficult it is to erase records once they have been properly created, approved, and preserved. Saturday morning arrived with bright sunshine reflecting across the driveway, turning the clean concrete into a pale mirror beneath the clear Texas sky. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, warm cedar fencing, and the faint aroma of coffee drifting from nearby porches as neighbors began their weekend routines. I carried a large storage box from the garage to my workbench, brushing away a thin layer of dust that had settled over it through the years. Inside were the original project binders I had assembled during construction, each one carefully labeled with dates, permit numbers, inspection phases, and engineering revisions. My wife used to laugh that I organized paperwork the same way other people organized family photo albums. That habit had never seemed especially important until now. One by one, I opened every binder, placing the documents across the table in chronological order. The original property survey came first, followed by soil evaluation reports, drainage calculations, stamped engineering drawings, contractor certifications, county permits, inspection reports, and finally the architectural approval letter issued by the Homeowners Association before construction even began. Every signature was original. Every approval carried matching dates. Every page fit perfectly into the sequence established more than 12 years earlier. Then I discovered something I had completely forgotten. Tucked inside the final binder was a compact disc labeled Project Completion Archive. Curious, I connected an old external drive to my laptop and opened its contents. Hundreds of construction photographs appeared on the screen, each automatically stamped with the original date and time they had been taken. There were images showing excavation before the first forms were installed, reinforcing steel placed exactly according to the engineering drawings, drainage piping before it was covered, county inspectors measuring elevations, and the final concrete pour before finishing crews completed the surface. Even more remarkable, several photographs showed members of the Homeowners Association Architectural Committee visiting the site during construction. Karen was not among them because she had not yet joined the board, but the committee members who approved the project were clearly visible inspecting the work before signing the final approval documents. Every photograph confirmed the same timeline already supported by the written records. Later that afternoon, I decided to visit the county engineering office to request one final piece of documentation. The senior engineer reviewed my permit number, disappeared into the records department for several minutes, and returned carrying a certified drainage compliance report prepared immediately after construction had been completed. He smiled politely while handing me the document. "Your project has one of the most complete files I have seen from that period," he said. "Everything appears to have passed without a single correction notice." I thanked him and added the certified report to my growing binder before driving home beneath a cloudless sky. As I parked on the same driveway that had suddenly become the center of this dispute, I realized the investigation had quietly shifted in my favor. I was no longer searching for evidence that the driveway had been built correctly. I had already found more proof than anyone could reasonably dispute. The remaining question was why the Homeowners Association had chosen to ignore its own approval history in the first place. Every document I uncovered made that question more difficult to avoid, and every new answer seemed to point toward the same unavoidable conclusion. The concrete had never changed. Only the story surrounding it had. By Sunday evening, my dining room had become a temporary engineering office. The long wooden table disappeared beneath neatly stacked binders, certified county records, stamped construction drawings, drainage calculations, inspection reports, archived Homeowners Association guidelines, and hundreds of photographs arranged in perfect chronological order. A warm breeze drifted through the open kitchen window, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass, while the ceiling fan gently lifted the corners of several blueprint sheets spread across the table. Looking at everything together, I realized I had stopped searching for evidence. My task had become much simpler. I only needed to organize the truth so clearly that nobody could reasonably misunderstand it. I began creating a timeline beginning with the original property survey, followed by the engineering design, county permit approval, Homeowners Association architectural approval, construction inspections, final completion certificate, and every subsequent document issued over the following 12 years. Near the end of the timeline, I placed copies of the recently revised Homeowners Association guidelines beside archived versions of the previous rules. The differences immediately stood out. Entire sections discussing existing approved improvements had disappeared, replaced by broader language that made no reference to projects already completed under earlier standards. On Monday morning, another certified letter arrived from the Homeowners Association. Karen informed me that because no demolition work had begun, additional enforcement procedures would now move forward. She warned that the association intended to recover legal expenses if further action became necessary. I quietly scanned the letter, saved digital copies, and placed the original into the evidence binder without writing a response. Every new notice simply strengthened the documented sequence of events. Around lunchtime, my attorney called after reviewing the complete collection of records I had assembled over the weekend. He paused for several moments before speaking. "Michael, this is no longer a construction dispute," he said. "This has become a procedural issue. Their own documents show they approved the project, and I cannot find any official action revoking that approval before these new standards appeared." He explained that applying recently adopted architectural requirements to a fully approved structure completed more than a decade earlier raised significant legal concerns, particularly when no documented transition policy existed. His advice was straightforward. Continue preserving every communication. Present only verified records. Allow the timeline to tell the story. That afternoon, I returned to the county engineering office with one final request. I asked whether archived inspection logs still existed beyond the completion certificates already in my possession. After several minutes, the records supervisor returned carrying a certified field inspection notebook scanned from the original project archive. Inside were handwritten inspection notes confirming drainage slopes, concrete thickness, reinforcement placement, and final acceptance measurements recorded during construction. Even the inspector's sketches matched the stamped engineering drawings exactly. As I thanked the supervisor and carefully added the certified copies to my binder, one thought continued returning to me. Karen believed this case depended on the appearance of a driveway. It never had. The outcome depended entirely on documentation created long before she ever questioned the concrete. Walking back across my driveway beneath the fading evening sunlight, I watched rainwater from a brief afternoon shower flow smoothly toward the curb exactly as the engineering calculations predicted 12 years earlier. The concrete remained unchanged. The approvals remained unchanged. The inspections remained unchanged. Only one thing had changed, and that was someone's attempt to rewrite a history that had already been permanently recorded. Tuesday evening settled over the neighborhood with a warm, orange glow, reflecting across the driveway while porch lights gradually illuminated one house after another along the quiet street. The smell of fresh asphalt from a nearby road repair mixed with the scent of trimmed grass as I carried my completed evidence binder into the study for one final review. Every document rested behind clearly labeled tabs. Original survey, engineering drawings, drainage calculations, county permits, architectural approval, inspection reports, archived Homeowners Association guidelines, website comparisons, certified records, construction photographs. Every page supported the next without leaving a single unexplained gap in the timeline. The Homeowners Association had scheduled a special compliance hearing for Thursday evening, and my driveway appeared first on the agenda. Karen clearly expected the meeting to end with formal authorization allowing additional penalties to move forward. Instead of feeling nervous, I felt the quiet confidence that comes from knowing every important fact had already been documented years before anyone questioned it. Early Wednesday morning, my attorney stopped by the house to review the final presentation. We spread the documents across the dining room table while sunlight streamed through the front windows and cast long reflections across the same driveway that had become the center of the dispute. He suggested only one adjustment. Rather than presenting the evidence by category, he recommended arranging everything by date so the board could watch the complete history unfold exactly as it happened. The idea immediately made sense. We reorganized the entire binder into a chronological presentation, beginning with the original property survey and ending with Karen's most recent enforcement letter. The result looked less like a legal argument and more like an unmistakable record of cause and effect. Later that afternoon, another email arrived from Karen reminding me that failure to remove the driveway before the hearing would be considered additional evidence of noncompliance. I saved the message beside every previous notice without replying. Each communication strengthened the timeline by confirming that enforcement continued even after the original approval records already existed. Before sunset, I visited a local print shop where enlarged copies of the engineering drawings and archived Homeowners Association approvals had finished printing. Seeing the stamped plans displayed at full size made every detail easier to understand. Elevation notes, drainage arrows, inspection signatures, and approval stamps all appeared exactly as they had 12 years earlier. The owner of the print shop glanced at one of the drawings and smiled. "Whoever designed this paid attention to every detail," he said. I quietly thanked him before loading everything into my truck. Driving home beneath the fading evening sky, I realized something important had changed over the past several days. At first, I believed I was defending a driveway. Then I thought I was protecting an engineering project. Now I understood that I was defending the integrity of documented decisions made honestly by professionals who followed every required procedure. The concrete itself had never needed protection. The record did. That evening, I walked slowly to the end of the driveway as the last light disappeared behind the trees. Rain from a brief afternoon shower flowed gently along the original drainage path exactly as the calculations predicted more than a decade earlier. I looked down at the smooth concrete beneath my feet and closed the evidence binder for the night. Karen believed Thursday's hearing would confirm her authority. She had no idea it would instead reveal that every signature, every permit, every inspection, and every approval had been patiently waiting to tell a very different story. Thursday evening arrived beneath a clear sky as homeowners slowly filled the clubhouse, their quiet conversations blending with the soft hum of the air conditioning and the smell of freshly brewed coffee waiting near the entrance. A long conference table stretched across the front of the room beneath bright lights, covered with neatly arranged agendas, architectural guidelines, and thick binders prepared by the board. Karen stood confidently near the projector, greeting residents with the calm assurance of someone convinced. The outcome had already been decided. My driveway appeared as the first item on the compliance agenda. When the meeting officially began, routine business moved quickly before Karen rose to present her recommendation. She projected recent photographs of my driveway onto the screen, carefully explaining that the surface no longer complied with current architectural standards and recommending that the board uphold the $3,000 penalty while authorizing additional enforcement if corrective action failed to begin immediately. The photographs looked familiar because they were the same tightly cropped images I had received by email days earlier. They showed only sections of concrete, carefully excluding the drainage swale, the curb inlet, and every feature demonstrating how the system had been engineered to function. When Karen finished speaking, the board president thanked her before asking whether I wished to respond. I carried my binder to the front table, placed it beside the projector, and quietly opened the first tab. Rather than arguing, I displayed the documents exactly as they had been created over 12 years. The original property survey appeared first, followed by stamped engineering drawings showing elevations, drainage calculations, and expansion joint spacing. Next came the county building permit, the approved architectural application submitted to the Homeowners Association before construction began, and the inspection report signed during every phase of the project. One document naturally led to the next until the entire construction history unfolded across the screen in perfect chronological order. My attorney then projected archived copies of the Homeowners Association guidelines saved years earlier, placing them beside the recently revised version now being enforced. The differences were immediately visible. Entire sections protecting previously approved improvements had disappeared from the newer document. He calmly explained that every revision date occurred more than a decade after my driveway had received final approval and that no board resolution, meeting minutes, or homeowner notification could be found applying those revisions retroactively. A certified county engineer present at the meeting confirmed that the drainage design, concrete thickness, inspection results, and construction approvals remained fully compliant with the standards in effect when the project was completed. The room became noticeably quieter as board members compared the certified records with the enforcement file assembled by Karen. One director asked when the original approval had supposedly been revoked. Karen answered that the current standards controlled all properties. Another board member quietly requested the revocation document. None appeared. The board attorney reviewed the certified timeline before explaining that he could find no official action removing the original approval or authorizing retroactive enforcement against previously accepted improvements. After a brief recess, the directors returned to the table. The board voted unanimously to withdraw the enforcement action immediately, cancel the $3,000 penalty, and suspend every similar driveway case, pending an independent legal and engineering review. The attorney further advised that because the association had continued enforcement after receiving evidence of the original approvals, outside legal counsel, engineering consultants, and procedural corrections would now be required. Estimated costs presented during the meeting exceeded $50,000. I quietly closed the binder and looked once toward the projector where every document remained displayed in the exact order history had created them. Nobody had defeated the concrete because the concrete had never been the issue. The paper trail had simply refused to disappear, and by the end of the meeting, every signature, every inspection, every permit, and every approval had finally spoken louder than authority ever could. The following Monday morning felt remarkably ordinary, and that was exactly what made it unforgettable. The early sunlight stretched across the driveway in long golden lines while the familiar scent of damp grass drifted through the neighborhood after the automatic sprinklers completed their morning cycle. A robin hopped across the edge of the concrete searching for worms, completely unaware that the same driveway had nearly become the center of an expensive mistake. I stepped outside with a mug of coffee and stood quietly where Karen had handed me the violation notice only a few weeks earlier. Nothing about the concrete had changed. The surface remained smooth, the expansion joints remained perfectly aligned, and the drainage channels carried the previous night's rain exactly where they were designed to go. Later that morning, a certified letter arrived from the Homeowners Association. I opened it carefully at the dining room table where my engineering binders still rested in neat stacks. The board formally withdrew every violation issued against my property. The $3,000 penalty was canceled in full. The letter acknowledged that my driveway had received valid architectural approval, county permits, engineering review, and final inspections before construction, and that no official action had ever revoked those approvals. The board also announced an independent review of every recently revised architectural guideline, along with mandatory legal consultation before any future enforcement involving previously approved infrastructure could move forward. Several days later, another community update explained that the association had retained outside legal counsel, engineering consultants, and records specialists to review historical approvals and revise enforcement procedures. Residents learned that the combined legal expenses, engineering analysis, administrative corrections, and policy revisions would cost the association approximately $50,000. Ironically, none of those expenses came from the driveway itself. They came from ignoring the documents that already existed. Karen resigned before the independent review reached its final conclusions. I never celebrated her decision because replacing one person never fixes a broken process. Correcting the record does. Over the following weeks, neighbors stopped by my house for reasons that had nothing to do with disputes. Some wanted advice about drainage improvements. Others asked questions about permits, retaining walls, sidewalks, and construction approvals. Susan laughed one afternoon while standing beside my truck and admitted she had started saving every document connected to her own property after watching everything unfold. I told her that good records rarely seem important until the day someone claims they do not exist. One Saturday morning, a young couple moving into the neighborhood knocked on my front door, carrying a folder of renovation plans for their first home. They asked if I would look over the drawings before they submitted them for approval. We spread the plans across the same dining room table where I had organized my own evidence only days earlier. As I explained permits, drainage, and approval procedures, I realized this story had quietly become something much larger than a driveway. It had reminded an entire neighborhood that rules matter, but records matter just as much. Before putting away the final binder, I opened it one last time. The original engineering drawings rested beside the violation notice that had started everything. I decided to leave them together forever because they told two very different stories on the same pages. One represented an assumption made without looking backward. The other represented facts preserved with patience and care. I closed the binder, stepped back onto the driveway, and watched the afternoon sunlight reflect across the concrete exactly as it had for the past 12 years. Structures are built with concrete, steel, and careful measurements, but trust is built with something far stronger. Honest records do not crack under pressure. They simply wait until someone is willing to read them. Justice is not loud. It is careful, documented, and inevitable.